Hello YouTube, and welcome back to the 9th part of my Blender Basics series. In the last video I left off with asking you to figure out how you would unwrap the nose of this dolphin, and so I'm just going to show you how I did it quickly. Now first I took this head here and I separated it into two halves, and the unwraps look like this. Oh my gosh, I need to turn off my email. Okay, there you go. That's going to keep those pop-ups from coming up anymore. Anyways, I unwrapped it into two halves, so as you can see it appears like this and like this. And so that's going to cause an issue when we make the textures where you'll be able to see the seam here, but we're going to fix that with a technique that I will show you later once we do that. But anyway, so that's the first thing I did. The second thing I did was I actually took these two halves and I hid them with the H button. So I highlighted them by going into face select mode, clicking on L, and as you can see the seams are good because this selection doesn't spill out over them. So that means that these are blocked in correctly. So then I did that, I pressed H to hide, and I just isolated the mouth by itself here so that I could see what I was doing. And after that I saw there were some minor errors with the mesh here, which I cleaned up. And after I cleaned those up, because errors with the mesh will give you difficulties with the UV map, so after I cleaned that up, I just marked a seam here. So the palette of the mouth is split into a top and bottom half, and those look like this. So like that, and then the bottom half, let me just get it to where I can click on it. There you go. So hover over it, clicking on L in face select mode, and there you can see the two halves. So that's really it. I isolated the mouth. Let me unhide. I isolated the mouth from the head, and then by hiding these and revealing the inside of the mouth, I split it into two halves. So that was just pretty straightforward. Hopefully it wasn't too bad for you, but you know, it's good practice. Alright, well now that that's done, I'm going to just show you one change that I made. I ended up using the default unwrap for this top fin because when I looked at it a second time, it actually looks okay. Alright, so now that I've told you that, I'm going to clean this mess up, because if I select everything, as you can see, this is a total jumble. I mean, it looks like a spider web that just a crazy. It's like a whole nest of spiders. So we're going to make this a little bit better, and first we're going to do that by just taking individual things. So I'm going to hover over this fin, for example, press L, and as you can see the seams are good because it's not like anything else, and I'm just going to shrink this and move it off to the side. And we're going to go ahead and just do this for all of our components, so just selecting them, shrinking them, moving them off to the side, so that we can work with them easier. I'm going to make sure that these two fins are basically the same size, since they're the same size in the model. Alright. Now that's the one nice thing about these UV maps, is you can actually, this little grid here, this is the image, this is where the image will go, but you can actually just move these things off of wherever the image will go so that you can see them better. And that's a good way to get things organized. Right, one cool trick that I'm going to show you now is I'm going to select this by pressing A to select all of these vertices after. So after highlighting it here to make it show up in this window, I press A to select all the vertices. Then if I select everything, this will still be highlighted. So now I can see where this is in the sea of vertices and just drag it around and scale it. So there you go. All of the fins will go here. And this is basically, you know, I do this after I've unwrapped everything rather than before. It's just personal preference, I guess, but to me it makes it easier to have everything clean and unwrapped before you organize it. Alright, let's see. So that's all of our fins. There's the back fin, there's the top fin, and there's front back. If you ever lose track of what's what, for example, if you look at this and you don't know which fin it goes where, you can just highlight it here and it will show up. Or additionally, you know, if you have everything selected, you can deselect it by pressing maybe, you know, circle select and then shift click, and then you'll see the changes here will show you which vertices here correspond to which vertices here. So that's another thing to note. Let's see, so I've got all the fins now. Now I guess it's just a few little things. The mouth, I'm probably going to move the mouth. Now this is relatively painless, really. I mean, this process is actually pretty easy compared to the process of like you know, marking the seams in the first place, because now everything is shaped nicely. You just have to organize it. But I've actually remember something. I was going to weld these 2 points. This is the mouth, and these things should be welded together, so that, you know, so that there's not a split between the texture. So I'm just going to do that quickly. Again, click on the 2 vertices, W to weld, and then double check to make sure they're connected. Alright, good. That was just a quick thing I was going to do. Okay, so there's our mouth, there's our fins, and of course you can probably imagine what's going to happen next. I'm just going to keep on moving things around and scaling them until I have, oh, there you go, until I have everything in a separate place, so they'll all be separate. Okay, great. Look at that. That is so much cleaner already. And you know, you see how these are on top of each other. Well, instead of deselecting everything like this and then selecting this and moving this piece, what I can do is I can press L, and that's just going to highlight the island like I showed you in the previous video. So now I can just move this here out of the way. It actually, even if I have a bunch of things on top of each other, I'll move this back here and I'll move this over here. I can still press L over something and it'll highlight an individual thing. So that's one other way that you can move stuff around, is just by pressing L to move the little islands, the vertice islands. Okay, well, everything is now separate, so we can see where everything is and what it is. However, we want it to fit inside of this image, and this is the part where it gets slightly more tricky, but not too much, because we're going to have to make sure that in order for the texture to look as seamless as it can be, we want the size of these faces, or we want the proportions. That's, yeah, there you go. I'm looking for the word proportions. We want the proportions of these faces to be similar to what they are in the actual model. So we don't want a massive fin, or a fin that's the same size as the body, because then when the pixels of the texture are underneath that, you're going to notice that it'll be significantly more or significantly lower quality texture here because of how small it is, or how few pixels are actually able to fit on these faces than here, because even though this is physically smaller, the texture is almost, this thing in the map is almost the same size. So yeah, keep good proportions, just remember that. And it doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be reasonable. I mean, I think you would agree that having a fin this size where the body is that size is quite unreasonable and would probably mess up the textures. So yeah, that's really just common sense though. So that's not too bad. All right. And as you can see right now, I'm just arranging it. A lot of UV that I didn't realize when I first started doing Blender is just how much hand tweaking actually went into these maps. I used to think that there was a way to just slap a few seams onto a model, press unwrap, and then everything would just magically be in place. But as great as that would be, you unfortunately have to do stuff by hand, a lot of things by hand. So it needs a human touch for it to really look good. And that's okay. That's not actually a bad thing. It just makes it a little more time consuming to do textures. If you go onto my Facebook page, actually, there should be a link in my channel. You can see it's one of the earliest UV unwraps that I made, and it looks terrible. I basically used the let's see, what was it? Let me see, check the unwrap options. I used the Smart UV project on an entire model, and I'm not going to do that now because it's going to erase all of this stuff that I've just done right now, and I would hate to have to redo that. But I just clicked on U and Smart UV project, and it made a mess, and I thought that was going to give me something like what I have now. you know, because I was very new to it. So, you know, this should save you quite a bit of time learning this and getting good habits before you end up smart UV projecting an entire model and messing it up, because that is painful, and I speak from experience. It was quite difficult to patch that model together, but it turned out great in the end. It was actually a really good experience, and I learned a lot about 3D modeling. That's one of the reasons I feel comfortable with doing this tutorial right now with you guys, is because that project kind of gave me a confidence boost, I guess. I hope, yeah, you can see while I am chatting with you that I've just been laying things out. But unfortunately now there's no room for the back fin. So, you know, I'm just going to have to move things around and resize, and this is quite standard when it comes to arranging things. You're going to find that you've got everything almost fitting, and then there's just that one pesky piece that is not fitting. In this case, it would be that fin. Alright. Okay, it will happen quite often. Rotate 180. And these could be made smaller. They don't need to be so big. Okay. Gotta make sure that get a good space. So another thing to keep in mind, and what I'm trying to do now is, even though it can be frustrating to try and really squeeze things into a texture map, you want to try and have it be as cramped and close together as possible without affecting the actual texture. And the reason for that is because you have, the more space you can devote to being on the UV map, the better quality you'll have with your actual texture. So if you leave a bunch of really wide gaps, those gaps could have been used for making the texture more detailed or better. So really, as you know, it's difficult to try and squish everything in there and try and get as much space as possible out of this map, but that's really how you're going to get the best looking textures in the end. Alright, so I didn't actually have to do too much resizing here. That's good. Let's see, I probably have to scale this down a bit. Alright. It's almost like a puzzle, trying to figure out how they fit together in the most space efficient way. Alright, cool. Very good. Okay. Yes, I like that. Okay, so that's something. Your end texture should look something like that. Doesn't have to look exactly like that, but in the I may end up actually changing some things. Let's see. Does this body take up too much space? That's another thing to consider. Okay, so I'm okay with this as a preliminary, but what I'm going to do now to test it is I'm going to do the ambient occlusion that I showed you before in the last video, and if you remember, I said this was going to be important, and you're going to see why now. I just check that, and then I'll make a new texture. I'll make it 1024 by 1024 for this dolphin. Okay. Oh, I'm going to name it ambient occlusion. Okay. Alright, now you'll see the magic will happen. Alright, there's our texture, our first little image, and we'll go to the camera and click bake, just like we did in the last video. Alright, let's see. 16 pixels, good. Alright, let's see how that looks. Okay, now let's go into texture view. Alright, oh, I forgot to delete the lamp again. That's why I have you can see some pretty crazy shadows. Look at that shadow of the fin. That's cool, but I don't really want that on the final texture, so I am going to rebake this. Okay, let's just do that. Select everything again and rebake it without the light casting crazy shadows this time. Alright, so just look at the difference that makes. It makes a pretty huge difference. I mean, maybe the shadows on these fins are a little too harsh right now, but I can change that. Also, it's too dark here in the mouth, but I'll tweak this a little bit, but for now you can see that it gives it a much more three-dimensional aspect. Alright, so that's ambient occlusion. You can see the difference it makes there. I'm just going to make sure that this is detailed enough. And one of the things you might notice is all of this grain here. And let's see if I can remember where to fix this. Right here under gather. So the same little, if you click on this world icon and go to ambient occlusion, underneath that should be a tab called gather, and under sampling, the higher you make this, the less of this grain that you'll see. So I'm going to make this 20, and keep in mind it's going to take a lot longer to bake an ambient occlusion map with higher sampling, but it'll be worth it, because even though it takes longer, it'll give you a much better quality for the same resolution. And who doesn't love more quality for the same resolution? Okay. I'm going to just cut the loading out because it's going to take a while. Okay, and we're back. Look at this. This is if you go back and see where I was showing you the grain before, this is the same resolution. So that's what increasing the sample can do for you. So definitely increase sampling just to make a smoother map. It looks much, much better now. Well, I am nearing the end of this video since it's reaching 20 minutes now. So one thing to keep in mind, be sure to save. Definitely always save your work. And before you quit, you need to take this image and you need to save this particular image as your ambient occlusion map, because if you don't save it now, when you close Blender and come back, it's going to be gone and you're going to have to rebake it. So image, save as image, and I've actually made a folder here I'm going to show you. So under basic, Dolphin, there you go. So I've got a little textures folder in here. I would recommend making a folder for your model. So here you can see the Dolphin folder with the Dolphin, and the Dolphin model is in here. And inside of that folder also include the little textures folder so that you can save things like this. So I'll call this Dolphin Occlusion. There you go. Yeah, just organize your files, save this image before you lose it so you can reload it next time. And in the next video, we can actually start putting textures on. So I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you found this helpful and that you're now comfortable with UV unwrapping. And again, I will see you in the next video where we'll be finally doing some textures. Bye.